So the Bitcoin ETF is literally days away, and we now have billionaires predicting a Bitcoin 2024 super cycle. So today we're going to be discussing the groundbreaking video of Chamath coming out yesterday predicting that 2024 is going to be the year of Bitcoin and Bitcoin is going to cross the chasm. So of course, we're going to look at what the crossing the chasm theory is. And of course, we're going to look into the dark side of Chamath to see whether he has an alternative viewpoint or strategy for this Bitcoin price prediction that I think many people might be overlooking considering his interesting background. So of course, we're going to cover all of that and whatever you guys want me to cover today. So again, leave me any questions in the live chat, but I want to go straight to this video of Chamath and I'm going to try to
Bitcoin to this is the most important year for Bitcoin that has ever existed. We are probably days away from a series of ETFs being approved. And so this is the moment for Bitcoin to use that old term, cross the chasm and really see mainstream adoption where our parents and our grandparents understand what it is, can buy it, and then do buy it. And I think that if all of this comes to pass, Bitcoin will be a part of the traditional financial lexicon by the end of 2024. So that is my most anticipated. This is the most.
Well, what do you guys think about that? I feel like a DJ with my headphones on. I hope that audio works for you guys. But Chamath believes 2024 is the year that Bitcoin goes mainstream and it crosses the chasm. So what does that mean? Well, I have a chart for you guys. Now, what this is referring to is a technological adoption curve. So most people would know that when we are kind of talking about technologies, they get adopted in exponential curves. So the typical framework that I commonly talk about is it normally takes around 10 years for a new technology to go from 0 to 10% adoption. Okay, so this here would represent the early market. So when we're looking at this chart here, it takes on average 10 years to go through the innovators and the early adopter phase of adoption. Okay, so it takes around 10 years to get to this 10% adoption phase. And then all revolutionary technologies are faced with this chasm. Okay, and now this is where this little boy here is trying to jump from the early adopter phase to the early majority. So lots of technologies actually fail to reach this early majority because they don't have the right technology, okay? Lots of technologies fail and they stall out at 10% because the technology is not fit to go mainstream. And I've made the argument in the past that Bitcoin was like this before 2020. Before 2020, Bitcoin did not have the ingredients to cross the chasm or go from this innovator stage of adoption to an early majority stage of adoption because there weren't things like the Bitcoin Lightning Network rolled out. The education simply was not there for the Bitcoin space before 2020. Now we have nation states mining Bitcoin. Now we have nations all around the world getting onboarded to the Bitcoin Lightning Network. I might actually go live later today because another nation state actually announced that they are adopting the Bitcoin Lightning Network and they're going to begin using Bitcoin as a unit of account in their country. I'm not going to reveal what that country is. You're going to have to tune into the later live stream, but I want to talk a little bit more about this crossing the chasm theme before we look into the past of Chamath. Okay, so I think this is the most interesting way we should be analyzing Bitcoin's adoption curve. So I'm going to once again try to share my screen and I'm going to show you guys a really interesting article. I think it's interesting, but it kind of looks at Bitcoin through the lens of it being a technological adoption curve. So I'm going to go through this once again because this is going to really highlight how adoption is exponential. Okay, so I don't have the specific article I want, but I have my article. So I wrote an article on this in 2021, making the case that Bitcoin is going to see a super cycle. It's going to break these 4-year cycles of diminishing returns. And I said this is all because Bitcoin is a technology that is going to be adopted by the majority of society, either as a store of value, a new global reserve currency, or a medium of exchange. And I was making the case that we should expect Bitcoin to follow a typical S-curve in its adoption path, just like any other technology. Money is a technology after all. And you can see these S-curve charts. So this is very similar to what the crossing the chasm thesis is all about. It's talking about you get this takeoff phase in adoption when you begin to get the early majority onboarded onto a new technology. Okay. And you can see this is why all new revolutionary technologies go through an exponential phase of adoption. Okay. And now this is where we start talking about the multiplier effect, and we start talking about super cycles. Because obviously, if Bitcoin is going to go through an exponential phase of adoption, it doesn't make sense that we continue to see these diminishing returns of Bitcoin. So again, this was a 2021 article I wrote. At the time, people thought I was absolutely crazy for talking about the Bitcoin multiplier effect and super cycles, and why Bitcoin could hit $64 million per coin in a very conservative world without hyperinflation. People thought I was nuts. But I want to go through a couple more charts because it does relate to what Chamath is talking about today. So I've got a quote here. I say, so we've established a rough conservative estimate for a TAM of Bitcoin being $900 trillion. But what path will it take to get there to achieving a portion of that TAM? And I actually made the case in this article, Bitcoin could comfortably accumulate $450 trillion in regards to a TAM. So I say the path you're going to take to get there is going to be through a super cycle, okay? Bitcoin is not going to reach a $50 trillion TAM, a $100 trillion TAM, going through, 100 years of diminishing returns every 4 years. It's going to take a century for Bitcoin to reach that price. I don't think that's going to happen. So this is where I start talking about the multiplier effect and how this is going to create a super cycle. So in this 2021 article, I made the case that a very conservative estimate for the multiplier effect in a bull market is 5x. So you can see if we only have $10 trillion of inflows, that would actually send Bitcoin to a price tag of $2.4 million per coin. I'd like to remind you guys, the real estate market is $350 trillion in size. We also have some of the world's largest money managers in the world now racing to accumulate a Bitcoin spot ETF. So I think out of the top 20 money managers around the world, 10 of them are now applying to put out there a Bitcoin spot ETF, or they're applying for the rights to custody Bitcoin for their clients, because some of these, banks, and they control, I think it's like $50 trillion of capital. So again, I'm being very conservative. If I'm not saying $10 trillion of inflowing capital is not an outrageous amount of capital. It might be to some people, but when you look at Bitcoin in the small, in the small sea of $900 trillion of money, I think it makes more sense. But now I want to start talking a little bit more about Chamath. Okay, lots of people kind of talk about Chamath. Should we trust Chamath? I'm not so sure, but I want to first just talk about his background and why this prediction is actually very big, and it's something to pay attention to. This dude is a billionaire. So we can see his net worth, $1.2 billion. Okay, so he has some serious chump change. And that's why I made a video talking about Chamath. But should we trust Chamath? Okay, the SPAC king, should we trust him? I'm not so sure. So we can actually see that he's changed his view on Bitcoin many times in the past. Back in 2013, he said, I am very, very long Bitcoin. In 2023, though, he said crypto is dead in America. Now in 2024, he's saying Bitcoin is going mainstream and it's going to cross the chasm. So again, take everything Chamath says with a big grain of salt. Okay. He is, he's part of the All In podcast. Good morning from Australia. Will Stopson versus the Guru. It's good to see we have some Australians in the chat. Somebody's trying to get their hair like me for the past 12 years. My friend, what you need is an outrageous amount of hair wax. That's how you get psycho hair like myself. But we're not here to talk about my hair. We're here to talk about Chamath. I want to try to show you guys another video that went viral in 2022 of Chamath. I'm going to try my dandy best to try to pull that puppy up, because I think it's really interesting. A lot of people, They trust Chamath. I'm not so sure we should be trusting Chamath or not, because what I'm about to try to show you is the fact that he's a shitcoin pump and dump. So first I might show you this Bitcoin news video of him talking about Bitcoin very eloquently in like 2013, because I think it's interesting.
That's why I'm a huge fan of Bitcoin. I mean, I'm very, very long Bitcoin. People ask me, on Twitter, I got into a long conversation with a guy over the weekend, and he asked me what my favorite Bitcoin companies were, and I said none. I said, right now you just want to own the underlying commodity. Like,
crypto's dead in America.
It is dead in America.
Crypto's dead in America. I mean, now you had Gensler. You had Gensler even blaming the banking crisis on crypto. So the United States authorities have firmly pointed.
So in 2013, Chamath is saying that Bitcoin is a commodity. Okay, he's saying Bitcoin's a commodity that I am very long. So it actually sounds like he understands Bitcoin. Then in 2023, he's kind of saying, yeah, well, crypto is dead in America. Do you think Chamath meant that? Or do you think he was trying to, crash the price of Bitcoin and trying to pump his bags a little bit? I don't know, but, I'd like to just put that thesis out there. I think a lot of people take what Chamath says at face value, and I'm not sure that's something we should be doing. Now, I've absolutely failed to try to link up the audio that I want to show you guys, but I'm just going to essentially translate you this video from 2021, or maybe it was 2022, where Chamath was on the All In podcast. Okay, so what he was doing on the podcast was he was actually talking about his bags of Solana. Okay, everybody knows Solana is a shitcoin. So Chamath has gone from, saying Bitcoin is a commodity in 2013, well before most people, saying he's very long it, to in 2021 coming out and joking with his friends David Sachs, who's also a very, very famous VC investor. These guys invested in all of the big companies that we see today very early on. Facebook, Uber, Twitter, all of these guys invested in some huge companies very early. So they watch the All In podcast. It's a very popular podcast because these guys have gotten in early on some things. But we can see here, Chamath changed his tune. From 2013, he's saying Bitcoin's a commodity, and now he's joking on the All In podcast about dumping his Solana on the heads of retail speculators. Okay, so again, I think we should really watch what Chamath is saying. We should watch what all of these Wall Street gurus are saying. Another Wall Street guru that I actually wouldn't mind talking about today is one called Fred Krueger. Now, you guys might have seen Fred, okay? I'm going to actually try to log into, well, actually, I'm going to do it the roundabout way to show you guys what I want to show you guys. Because I do want to show you guys something really interesting. You guys might have heard of a chap called Fred Krueger. He's been going somewhat viral on Twitter recently for his takes on the Bitcoin spot ETF. He's actually been going live every single day talking about the spot Bitcoin ETF. And, from my understanding of Fred, he was one of the, he's a pioneer on Wall Street. He's got a PhD in math. He's done it all. And lots of people are taking his opinion as gospel. So I'm going to share something. Now, again, nothing against Fred. I've interacted with him on Twitter a couple of times, and, nothing against him. He seems like a cool chap. He's very bullish. I like bullishness. You guys all know that. But I want to start picking apart what he said about the Bitcoin spot ETF. And again, if you have any questions in the live chat, drop them in there. I'm about to circle back around to the live chat and have a look at all your questions. So Freddy Boy came out yesterday. He said, anybody who claims not your keys, not your Bitcoin, should read this. If you own the spot Bitcoin ETF, you own the Bitcoin. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I don't think that's true. So obviously it's great to see Preston get in the live chat here and kind of correct Big Freddy Boy and say, look, that's not how we should be looking at this. I had a crack at Freddy Boy here and I said, this is the same as saying you own your gold in the bank in the 1930s. Now, most of you guys might know, some of you might not know, but in 1933, in the depths of the Great Depression, there was something called Executive Order 6102. So America was too indebted, and essentially they stole everybody's gold through an executive order, and they called this 6102. So I said the 1933 gold confiscation proved that notion and your notion is incorrect. And Big Freddy Boy came out and he said, with all due respect, that was 90 years ago. There's no way America could seize the people's gold 90 years later because we're so much more sophisticated today. Well, I said, with all due respect back to you, Freddy Boy, the US and the wider world currently has more debt than it did in the 1930s and the 1940s long-term debt cycle deleveraging. Governments do unthinkable things when they're broke. It's no coincidence we see a wave of tyranny every 90 years. It's just math, okay? Most of you guys might know I have a thesis that the fourth turning and the 80-year long-term debt cycle are intertwined. Every single time that governments are indebted, they become tyrannical, and that is where you see a wave of uprising and populism as the people say, look, it's not fair that you have all this money, we want some of it back, and they tear down the institutions. So that's besides the points for today's videos, but you can see I linked a thread to me looking at the long-term debt cycle and how Bitcoin plays into it that I wrote in 2021. So again, I think this is really important to analyze because, again, this is not true. Okay, you do not own Bitcoin if you own the spot Bitcoin ETF. Okay, the beautiful and the revolutionary thing about Bitcoin is if you own the keys, it's your Bitcoin. If you don't own the keys, it's not your Bitcoin. You're trusting the Bitcoin spot ETF. Okay, so again, before we circle back around to the live stream, if you want help actually taking custody of your Bitcoin, getting the keys off the exchange, or even setting up a multi-signature collaborative custody setup, well, you can reach out to me. I'm working with the Bitcoin advisors, and we can get you set up with a multi-signature setup that has 3 keys on 3 different continents in under 60 minutes. So again, we think this is a great alternative to spot Bitcoin ETFs. It's not full self-custody, okay? You only hold 1 key, but it is far better than you trying to set up a multi-signature setup and you screw it up yourself. I've personally done that I've done that myself, and we're probably going to talk about that in a later video, but I want to hit the live stream quickly, and then we're going to talk about Chamath just a little bit more, okay? So good morning from Australia. I don't know what time it would be in Australia right now. Chamath is the same guy who made the $1 million bet early in 2023. No, that was his buddy. Slimy, that was actually his friend, Balaji Srinivasan, another kind of tech entrepreneur, another VC investor. So no, he was talking about the state of crypto. I think you're actually correct there. James from Invest Answers is on the All In podcast. He probably is. James from Invest Answers has the maths for all sorts of situations, and he'll tell you to pump those Solana bags. Shitcoiners, I agree. I think they're all shitcoiners. I think you do not listen to shitcoiners, okay? Bitcoin, spot Bitcoin ETF is not Bitcoin. It's as simple as that. Chamath Palihapitiya is probably a man that you wouldn't want to trust him as far as you can throw him, okay? That's all I'm going to say, but I think it's a major signal that we have billionaires talking about the possibility of Bitcoin crossing the chasm. I hope today I was able to actually translate what crossing the chasm is and why it is so bullish. If you want to learn a little bit more about Bitcoin's technological adoption curve and why I believe Bitcoin could hit $64 million by the year 2030 based on this framework of it being a technological adoption curve, well, after the live stream, I'm going to slap a link on screen for a video that I recorded on that topic. You can find that one just about there. And with all that said, let me know in the comments down below what you thought of this one. What do you think of the Bitcoin spot ETF coming in 2 days' time? I don't know, but I'll see you all in another live stream in the near future. Thank you for tuning in.